Great chili is defined by rich, complex, deep flavor in a really approachable form factor. For the little upfront work that's involved, the results are insanely delicious. This is the first time really using a knife in this series for prep work. So first let's talk about how to hold the knife, and then I've got a couple tips that I use pretty much every time I do any sort of cooking. You're gonna want a chef's knife, you're gonna want it to be sharp. Holding a knife and positioning yourself in front of the board are important. Instead of holding it kind of like a baseball bat or like a tennis racket where your hand is all the way on the handle, you're gonna move up a little bit. Your middle finger is gonna come up to where this heel of the knife is, and your pointer finger and thumb are gonna grip this back of the knife. This allows you to cut really easily, keep your finger out of the way. So this pointer finger, don't wrap it around the knife and cut directly into your finger. I've seen kids with those like little plastic knives almost do that, and it's like such a bad habit. Don't do that. So keep your fingers choked up, keep your hand on it, and it basically becomes part of this part of your arm. And you'll be able to make a claw so you don't cut your fingers off. You've probably seen this before. If you haven't, it's really good to hold your left hand or your right hand, your non-dominant hand, the hand that's gonna be holding the ingredient, in a way that keeps the tip of your fingers out of the way. So don't cut like this. That's such an easy way to cut your fingers. Keep them tucked in, folded over like this, and keep your thumb out of the way. I have definitely cut into the side of my thumb by accidentally having my thumb past where my fingers are. You just need to keep an eye out for it and you'll be good. So if you keep your fingers like that, it's really hard to cut the tips of them. When you look at a recipe, any vegetable cutting probably should be done first. In the case of this chili, we've got a ton of veggies that are gonna be cut down to create a base of flavor. And if we start cooking our beef before doing those veggies, we're gonna be constantly trying to catch up. When I set up my station, I've got a cutting board that I'll put a paper towel under so it doesn't slip around. Boom, there you go. Now your board's not gonna slip around. You're gonna want a sharp knife. Got that right here. The other things that I like are a couple bowls. So one of these bowls is gonna be for the trash that's created, all of the compost, all of the extra vegetable, sort of like skins and seeds and everything that I'm not gonna be using is gonna go into one bowl that'll eventually go to compost. Prepped ingredients are gonna go in a different bowl. And then I've got a third bowl for ingredients that aren't gonna be cooked with everything else. I always keep a clean towel around if you need sort of an explainer on why. I've got a full video on the beauty of kitchen towels on my channel. You can check that out here. This sounds like a ton of stuff to keep in mind, but really the more that you cook, the more this becomes second nature and the more you really just get used to it. Honestly, cutting board, knife, bowls, you're good. So we've got our prep station set up, and now we can actually start on the prep itself. We can start by removing the stems from our dried red chilies. We've got 4 New Mexican red chilies that we're gonna take the top off and then open them up with your hands and pull out the seeds. The seeds add a little bit of bitter flavor that we don't want in the final dish. Place the peppers in a bowl and cover them with boiling water. Cover the bowl with plastic wrap to create a seal and let the hot water soften the dry exterior of the chilies. This is gonna allow us to blend them into a smooth paste later. For our bell pepper, remove the top and bottom with your knife and then set the pepper upright and cut the side with the tip of your knife. With that cut, you can lay the pepper on its side, placing your knife inside the cut that we just made and gently slice out the column of seeds that's in the center. If you do this correctly, the pepper should be left in pretty much one piece and all the seeds are gonna be left in another piece. The seeds can be discarded along with the ribs and then we can start cutting the pepper into a medium dice. A medium dice is really easy to achieve by slicing the large cheeks down into smaller pieces, something that's more manageable to work with. Cut those pieces into large matchsticks. This is also called a julienne. Turn those matchsticks so you can hold them on the board with your non-knife hand and cut them into little cubies called a dice. If you keep your fingers tucked in so that no knuckles stick out, it's much harder to nick yourself. This is what you'll see called the claw grip. Place your cut pieces in the ingredients bowl and any trash in the compost bowl. Your celery is probably gonna be pretty dirty, so be sure to give it a wash. I always cut off the tops and bottoms, usually around where it doesn't look wilted, and then cut the celery into 3 or 4 small equal length pieces. This is just giving us a size that's easier to work with. And then cut those pieces into matchsticks. These sticks can be turned 90 degrees and then chop them into little pieces. It's easier to take long, straight things into a dice, But how do you do that with a completely round object like an onion? This can be hard to break down into even cuts, so here's how I recommend doing it. I recommend starting with the two ends and cutting both of them off. One is the root end and one is the sprout. The root end needs to be barely shaved off so that the layers hold themselves together. You can just take the sprout end off anyway. Use the now flattened sprout side as a base and cut the onion in half from end to end. We'll take each half one by one. Now that it's broken open, it's really easy to peel off the dried outer layer. Set the onion on the large flat face we just created, and then we're gonna make cuts into the side of the onion. I usually do 3 of them, starting from the base of the onion, working upwards towards the top. These cuts shouldn't go all the way through the onion though. They'll be about 90% of the way towards the root end. That way the root stays intact and holds all those layers together. Now we can make our vertical cuts to form our grid. Same concept here, don't cut all the way through. The onion should still be holding itself together. Now turn it so you can hold it in your non-dominant hand with that claw grip and slice through that grid that we made. Once you get to the root end, you should be left with a little piece that can be added to our compost bowl. The pieces of onion should fall into a pretty even dice. Congrats, you now know how to correctly dice an onion. If you want more info on other ways, check out my full video on every way you need to know to cut an onion. We've got a jalapeno to dice here as well, which is easy enough. Cut off the top stem and cut it in half so we can remove the core and the seeds. I like to just hold it over a bowl and use a spoon to scrape out the seeds and ribs. Take one of these halves and make cuts to form even little matchsticks, and then turn those matchsticks 90 degrees and cut them into little even cubes. If you aren't super comfortable with your knife yet, simply take things slow. This is a great recipe to practice on. It's chili, we're not working in a Michelin star restaurant. Don't worry about it. For garlic these days, I have pretty much one way that I like to break it down. I like to take the peel off and then I grate it on my Microplane. These are super cheap, I'll link to one down below, and it has made my garlic prep so much faster. Take 3 cloves and grate them into a fine paste. Using the Microplane takes like half the time and saves a lot of chopping. Set that into a small bowl along with the jalapeno. We'll put these in after the other veggies have cooked for a little while, as they're more likely to burn because they're smaller pieces. Our chilies have now been sitting long enough for the hot water to completely soften them, so place your chilies in a blender with maybe half a cup of the blending water. This doesn't have to be exact here. Add 2 chipotles from a jar of chipotles and adobo, and then blend it until it's really, really smooth. The water in this blender is hot, so be careful. If you have a blender that has a top lid, hold it with a hand and a towel. Be sure the towel is covering your hand so you don't get any like steam burns. This will be bright, beautiful orange paste that's gonna bring a ton of chili flavor to our chili. This is what I like to use in lieu of chili powder. I found that chili powder is usually pretty bland in flavor. There's nothing wrong with using it. You could totally make your chili that way, but it's always worth learning how to turn something like a large dried chili into something that's super flavorful and useful. Chili powder itself is a spice blend, so we'll use this chili paste along with a bunch of other spices to create something much more exciting. That's it for our prep. It seems like a lot, but all of this can be done beforehand at your own pace, however you want to do it. We'll move over to our stove and begin heating our pot over medium-high heat. I like to use a Dutch oven here for this. I talked about the importance of browning in last week's episode on grilled cheese, but the gist of it is browning creates a lot of new flavor compounds that don't exist without browning. Add in a touch of oil to your pan once it's nice and hot, and then add in 1 pound of leanish ground beef. 90-10 is good here, 80-20 could work, it's just a little fatty. This is going to crowd our pan and immediately drop our temperature, so give it some time to get hot. I don't really like doing this in stages. It would probably be more efficient that way, but it's just too much moving around, it's too much back and forth. I simply keep the pan hot and move the meat around as needed. First the meat's gonna go gray, then it's gonna leach out a bunch of water, and then it will begin to fry and brown. You're gonna hear this change. It's gonna sound a lot different, so keep an ear out. Season this with salt and pepper now. We'll keep adding more seasoning each step of the way. This is how you end up with a properly seasoned dish. Once the meat is totally browned and broken up, we can remove it from the pan and turn the heat down to a medium low. If there isn't enough oil left in the pan from the beef, add in a little bit so there's more to cook our veggies. Add the onion, celery, and bell pepper into the pan and begin mixing to scrape up the brown bits from the meat. The veggies have a little bit of water that's gonna come out, and that should allow us to get all those brown bits up. Keep the pan over medium-low and let these soften. If you need to turn the heat up to speed this process, you can, just be sure to watch it. Add in salt and pepper and keep these moving around until they're translucent, soft, and maybe starting to brown slightly. We can now add our jalapeno and garlic. These don't really need much time in the heat. If at any point during this process something looks like it's about to burn, add a little bit of water and scrape up that section of the pan. Move your veggies to the side and squeeze in 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. If we let that tomato paste brown slightly, it's gonna take away the raw, bitter, sharp tomato flavor. You'll start to see everything on the bottom turn deeply brown, and that's the point where you can crack open a light beer and pour in about 3/4 of a cup or so. Use that liquid to scrape up everything stuck to the bottom of the pan. This is called deglazing, and it's super, super important for flavor. If you're not someone who uses alcohol, simply replace it with beef stock and you're gonna be golden. The beer needs a little bit of time to lose its raw alcohol flavor, so let the liquid go down by about half. Add your meat back in along with the chili paste that we made. This is not enough liquid on its own, so let's add in 3 cups of beef stock. For seasoning, Worcestershire sauce is a classic and it adds a little bit of deep acidity. Add in 2 tablespoons of that. I like the saltiness of soy sauce here, 1 tablespoon of that. 1 tablespoon of cumin is imperative to have chili that tastes like chili. It's kind of got that classic flavor you want. 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and a half teaspoon of sugar. If you've got brown sugar, even better. You're not gonna end up with a sweet chili, it's just barely enough to bring some balance to the richness and the spice of the chilies. Beans are really contentious in chili for some reason. As a kid, I always hated them. As I approach 30 though, it feels like a good idea to not just eat a big bowl of red meat, so I like beans in mine. 1 can of drained red kidney beans and 1 can of drained pinto beans go in. This is also a cheap way to basically double the amount of food that this pot has. Add in a few big pinches of salt, a ton of black pepper, and let this come up to a burbling simmer. We're gonna let this simmer uncovered for quite a while, at least an hour. During this time, the sauce is going to become thick, the chilies are gonna impart their soft, subtle heat, and the whole dish just becomes much more cohesive. If you taste it right now, it's not gonna taste right at all. Taste it in 20 minutes, it's gonna be a little better, but still not right. Wait an hour and you're gonna have this amazing, delicious, unctuous bowl of chili. Long cook times really do make a massive difference when it comes to stews and sauces. Use this hour to clean up and maybe prep some of the best cornbread ever to go along with it. Give the pot a stir every 10 minutes or so, but as long as your heat isn't too high, you're not gonna be in danger of burning it, so you won't have to baby it. Now, it's not to my preference, but this could totally be made with ground turkey instead of ground beef, and it would be a little less fatty and calorie dense. It's an option if you're into that, but for me, I like just ground beef in my chili. After the hour is up, the liquid level should be right about where the solids are. If you have a ton of liquid left in the pot, you can turn the heat up and stir it until it's thickened to your liking. This process of cooking out some of the liquid in a dish is called reducing, and you'll see it in a lot of recipes. If you do end up turning up your heat to reduce it, be sure to stir so nothing burns. Any burning at this point is gonna totally ruin the flavor. Just for the final bit of heat and acid, I add a few dashes of cayenne-based hot sauce, usually around 1 tablespoon of it. Taste this for final salt levels. If you have a lighter pinch than I do with salt, you're gonna probably need a little bit more at the end. When you do this type of seasoning, make an adjustment and then taste it. Continue making adjustments until it's to your taste preference. This is exactly what people mean when they say add salt to taste. This is now ready to serve and the choice is totally up to you. Do you want shredded cheese and diced onion? Go for it. Do you want this over some Fritos? Great, I love it. MK crumbles tortilla chips and put that on hers, but the best option is clearly a side of delicious jalapeno cornbread. The chili is perfectly spiced, warm, comforting, and filling. It's easily my favorite way to make chili. It stores super well in the fridge. You can freeze it so you've got it at a later date. And overall, it is just the ultimate rendition of that ground beef and bean chili. I'm from Texas and I could care less about beans or no beans in my chili anymore. It is delicious either way, and you're gonna be really, really happy that you made it. It's been a goal of mine for a long time to get substantially better at cooking, and if you have a resolution similar to that, join me on this journey. I challenge you to make this chili, top it however you like, and tag me on Instagram at CameronCookedThis so I can share your progress as well as mine. Stick around for next week's video as things are gonna get a little bit more challenging as we go, and check out last week's video about grilled cheese if you really want something that's simple, delicious for lunch, and is gonna teach you a lot about the browning process. I wanna give a quick massive shout out to the amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. These are people who have decided that my work is worth supporting financially. They get some cool benefits for doing so, and I get to continue making videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you here same time next week. Cheers.